Thank you. Good afternoon, and Gamza Hamnida for being here and listening to the NXP story. We've done this over the last year 2 times in the meantime, so exactly 1 year ago and then also beginning of the year. And what I would like to start with is a little video of Rinspeed. Some of you might have seen that, but I think that's showing pretty nicely what the connected car in the future might be about. So it's a joint development work that we are doing with the think tank Rinspeed, and we are bringing all our technologies into showcase cars. This is a BMW i3 converted car with mobile phone wireless charging, digital clusters, instrument clusters, security, personalization, payment functions in the car, car-to-car communication, so you see an ambulance coming, the traffic light can react to that, can even have the car following you. Self-driving. Of course, infotainment is in. Manage your house. Having a laser scanner on the roof and camera systems for better view. This thing is coming out. So this, of course, always is used to show how cool our technology can be. And then, unfortunately, I'm only the techie who always has to explain the chips, and they never let me be the actor with that beautiful girl in Barcelona there at the Spanish beach. As every year, so as I said, we are doing these type of videos, and we are playing with it. What you have seen is, of course, a lot of funny use cases, like the car is following you while you're running. Doesn't make a lot of sense. Creates a smile. But for postmen, if you're delivering post, in Germany we are already working on cars that follow you while you are walking. So you have the car, the postman is driving into the street, is opening the side door and has all the parcels and letters, and takes them out and walks to a house and puts it in the letterbox and goes to the next house, and the car just follows. There, these self-driving use cases and self-driving under restricted conditions makes, of course, already a lot of sense. Well, why am I talking about that? Most of you know we have last year married Freescale, so NXP, the former Philips Semiconductors, and Freescale, the former Motorola Semiconductors, have merged. Wedding day was December 7. So basically, of course, what we have merged is two successful companies, and that is important. I've seen a lot of mergers in the past where one very strong and a weak company were merging, or even worse, where 2 weak companies were merging and hoping the business gets better. This was not the case with the NXP Freescale merge, and you see it here. We had a lot of #1 positions all over the place, but basically the most important is we are the biggest automotive semiconductor provider in the meantime, so we have a 14% market share. Renesas and Infineon are at 9% on #2 and #3. But we also have a #1 in microcontrollers now, microprocessors, and in security and crypto controllers. And I will talk mainly about those 3 items going forward. So what that means for business unit automotive, we are out of this 10 billion company, we are 4 billion of the business. We are the biggest automotive semiconductor supplier, as I said. We have 30 sites, sites worldwide, and our development team is in the range of 2,500 engineers. So pretty massive, and what's of course good for me, but also my difficulty is that's pretty complex. The good news is that we can cover all 3 trends in automotive. So the main innovation in the automotive industry is, of course, in that seamless connectivity. Everyone wants to be connected like in your living room. You want to talk to anyone you choose via phone in a seamless way. You want to listen to content, you want to watch video, you want to have perfect traffic information. So this is basically an area where the old NXP was pretty active. Then the other part is, of course, this energy efficiency. So not only Volkswagen wants to have engines that are as clean as possible, but of course, this is towards the electric drivetrains a very, very strong trend. And also big markets like China especially are pushing, of course, with electric scooters and electric vehicles in the mega cities very much into that domain. And the most interesting one for me is basically that trend here in the middle, which is basically converting the traditional car into a self-driving car. And doing that basically in a way that you are able to drive more stable. So for me, the reason why this is the most interesting for me as a person is every year 1.3 million people die on the roads of this planet, and more than 50 million severe accidents happen. As far as I have it on my mind, this means more than 5,000 killed people every year in Korea, and more than 300,000 heavily injured people alone in Korea. And there is, of course, countries like in India, for example, where the traffic conditions are much worse. These rates are even way higher. But, of course, for me as an engineer, how cool would it be if I can make a contribution in saving a significant portion of these lives, and in making sure that mums and dads are coming home every night again to their families. How do I need to do that? Well, on a top level, the answer is very, very simple. Get the human out of that equation. 94% of all these heavy accidents are created by human beings. So they are not created by equipment failure, so a broken tire or whatsoever. And they are usually recognition errors, decision errors, or performance errors. And if I can take the human out and let a robot drive the car, then I have, of course, benefits, because under ideal conditions, that robot never is tired, never is fighting with the kids in the backseat, never has an argument with husband or wife on the co-driver seat, never is drunk, never gets emotional in a traffic jam because he needs to be faster in the office. And what we have seen is all these fatality trends went down over the last 20 years. Unfortunately, in the last 2 years, they spiked up again. So we have more killed people since 2 years again on the road. And the answer is because human beings start texting on mobile phones. If you are using your mobile phone while driving, the likelihood that you commit a fatal error or having a heavy accident is 40 times higher than if you don't have your mobile phone in your hands. So in other words, if you have a robot that is very, very predictable and is only focusing on emotionless driving on the roads and having a good surround view, then you can get rid of a lot of these issues. Well, how do you come to self-driving cars? There is 2 ways basically that we are seeing. Traditionally, by the existing car makers. So the existing car makers, they have built since 150 years now horse carriages that by accident have a combustion engine. And from there, of course, we are developing in more and more assistance systems slowly. First, you have adaptive cruise controls. So sometimes you can take your feet off the pedals. Then you have partial automation under certain conditions. You can take the hands off the wheel. And then you have, under restricted conditions, of course, a highway chauffeur, self-parking, until you reach the complete self-driving. But there is new entrants in the industry, and we just discussed it. Of course, California is one of the, at least think tanks, I would not say industry centers, but from this side here, people are coming into the equation that have built robots so far, industrial robots, and they say, okay, forget about the horse carriage with a motor, but I have a robot that by accident has wheels. So I'm really looking here and I have a complete IT system. And what do I need to do to make this IT system as robust as possible? So this whole traditional thinking of a car and why a car has to look like a car is broken there. And especially a very painful thing for, I would say in all fairness, I'm German, I'm allowed to say this, for the arrogant southern German industry, saying people like Tesla cannot build cars with electric drivetrains because they don't have the experience of building drivetrains, was maybe one of the most arrogant assumptions that I've ever heard in our industry clubs there in Germany. Because even if you're sitting on 100,000 man-years of experience of exhaust gas regulation and how to handle a combustion engine, Tesla doesn't need that. They are disruptive and they come also from that drivetrain side in a totally new area because no one has a lot of experience on electric drivetrains at the moment. Yeah? So with all of that, we are seeing here in that area a huge change. And I promise you the next 10 years are much more massive change than the last 50 years in automotive. Coming back to the self-driving robot, what does that mean? Well, a self-driving robot, of course, will only be accepted in public, and you have seen that in the press. There had been accidents in the last weeks, fatal accidents with piloted cars. A self-driving car will only be accepted if, of course, these sensors are better than a normal human being under all conditions. That's the clear topic. What that means is you need to have a lot of sensors. So your eyes, ears, hands, senses of a human being need to be replaced by senses that are always better than our human senses. Which means that you have, for example, cameras to replace my eyes, but cameras are not enough. You're having redundant sensor systems in there as well. So when the camera is blinded by the light, I still have a complete radar cocoon, and ideally, of course, completely around the car for hundreds of meters. Outside of the line of sight, I have car-to-car communication, and this is one of the key topics that we're going to talk about today, and of course, ultrasound, laser scanners, and the like. So this is getting pretty complex, and the good news is, from a silicon perspective, NXP, after that merge with Freescale, has all chips to build these self-driving robots. So in other words, we have the sensing side, we have the thinking side, so we have fusion machines. I'm gonna tell you about that in a minute. And then of course we have the actuators, so the arms and legs of the car, plus we have the neural network, the in-vehicle network, so CAN, LIN, FlexRay, Ethernet, to send the data between the various blocks. And what you see here is always these tiny little door locks. This means we have also the security expertise, of course, from our sister business unit. So that's the part of the self-driving car, and I will not deeply go into that, but what I mentioned the last time also here in Seoul was, of course, we have a very nice infotainment portfolio as well, so 19 of the top 20 radio and navigation system makers using our chips. So we have very nice software-defined radio offering, one-chip radios in the meantime. We are market leader for car access solutions, like the BMW display key is completely coming from us. We have the infotainment processors and the amplifiers. And just to give you one example what the semiconductor industry is doing at the moment, or what is basically the value proposition of semiconductors, is you all know the big fat radios, navigation radios, 2-DIN radios that you had in the last 10 years in your car, or that you still have in your car. 3 weeks ago, we have taped out a one chip, which is codenamed internally the Mercury. And this Mercury I'm going to pass around. So it has the size of a thumbnail. And this thing is a complete AM, FM digital radio. So satellite and terrestrial digital radio. That thing has 6 tuners and the basebands, and it is software programmable. So in other words, that thing is a complete highest end radio system. You can solder it into your shark fin antenna under the roof, and just downstream your audio data then that you have received. And basically you are saving a lot of cables, of course, between the antenna and the radio. And you have it all, you can imagine, way cheaper, of course, way more robust, much less PCB space and system cost if you up-integrate it in this way. And this up-integration game, this is what NXP as a company also is trying to do for all other systems. So we are taking basically the various building blocks, trying to bring this into one chip, and make a cost-down, power-efficient system, because also, of course, the compute power that you need for such a type of radio is, of course, orders of magnitude lower than you would have built the radio in discrete components. Yeah? So we will see this here, and I give you a few more of those examples also from the ADAS part. What is coming on top of that is, of course, also we had the device reliability. We try to get the human beings out of the equation, as I said. The devices, every chip has to be as robust as possible to keep the quality up. But what we are seeing as well now is coming in functional safety. So the car makers have to look at, under all conditions, my car has to be as robust as possible. So even a failing power steering or a failing engine must never create a fatality. And newest thing is, you have seen this also in the last year, under all conditions, even if a car gets hacked, it must not be able to create a fatal accident with that. So we are not getting only a discussion like in the ISO 26262 about functional safety, but also about hacking security, hacking robustness. And as said, we have quite some footprint here in that security domain, but with all of that, the automotive industry, the automotive chip makers are generating their value. And this is why our big share, so these 15%, 14-15% market share in automotive are for us so valuable. Because it's not only a consumer electronics type of chip and sell it and you have your X% price erosion per year. But here is true value, of course, that we are bringing to the industry and where we can make money out of that. Why is that also so important? Well, very simple. Last year was not only the all-time high of car sales, it was also the all-time high of car recalls. So the issue is the car industry had shipped millions and tens of millions of cars, but had to call back quite significant amounts. And this is, of course, a disaster for the car makers. And you see here the airbag story, or Takata airbags and so on, was, of course, very high in the press. Keys from GM and so on. There was quite a lot of big recalls. And what I'm gonna do now is I gonna hop onto a couple of examples. And of course, please stop me wherever you have a question. But the first question, the first thing that I wanted to show you is basically our radar systems and where we are with the radar systems in the meantime. So we have made quite some nice progress there. We had started after our radio one-chip story to also go into 80 or 77 to 81 gigahertz, I have to say, radar chips. These radar chips are used now around the entire car. And these radar chips are, the radar sensors, the radar systems, are getting smaller the higher the frequency is, because then your antennas get smaller with the higher frequencies. What you want to have is, so in automotive we had 24 gigahertz radar systems. Now we are moving to this 80 gigahertz band, and with that the antennas get way smaller. Now we need to shrink the chips and need to make the overall sensor much more power efficient and tiny. The only issue was in normal technologies, 80 gigahertz are hardly doable. We are the first ones worldwide who have a normal CMOS chip out there that can do this 80 gigahertz send receive. And at the moment our engineers are busy combining that, so this NXP chip, with the Freescale radar microcontrollers, to coming ideally to a radar one chip system. And you have a small tiny radar stamp, and I'll hand this around here maybe this way. So this is basically the radar module. You see the tiny little antennas, and you see the send receive functionality. We have played with that chip since 2 years with Google. So Google is gluing that to their existing cars and to these little tiny rolling phone booths. And that works well. And what we have also done in these partnerships with our lead customers, there is a bunch of others, and we have the first big design wins scored on these systems now. So we will be in the market volume production in 2018 or end of next year. So what we have there is basically also the capability of gluing more than one of those chips together, and you have 4 or 6 or 8 of those systems sending simultaneously and receiving simultaneously, and that basically creates a very, very high brightness radar system. So we can do both. We can do the small and tiny up integration in the radar stems, and we can build high brightness radar systems where you have 12 send and 16 receive channels, for example, and where you can very, very clearly detect obstacles. Our radar sensors are accurate enough to detect in a big room, so over 15 meters, a beating heart. Why do you need that? Well, of course, you can do even room occupancy detection for that, but you also can do these radar put these radar systems to traffic lights, for example, to do pedestrian detection while people are walking on a walkway, and if the traffic lights are red, you can warn via car-to-car communication the other cars. So this little radar stamp that I had shown you is a very nice example. It is basically a combination now of perfect NXP and old NXP and old Freescale silicon, the NXP transceiver, the Freescale microprocessor, and those two are going to merge over time into a one chip. The great thing for me is if you turn around that module, you have the power management ICs from Freescale, and you have the networking ICs, so CAN and Ethernet from old NXP. So if you would ask me for one example how the merged company can create value, that's of course a perfect picture, you know. So basically none of the companies could have done it alone. Together we have a complete sensor system. And companies like Hella in Germany, they have publicly announced already 3 weeks ago that they exactly take this form factor, these type of sensors, and they call it compact radar, in a 70-gram box, little plastics carrier, and it can be ordered from now onwards for cars, and is of course going to start mass production then end of next year. Yeah, so that will hopefully for us be very attractive business. There is car makers that are forecasting that they need between 10 and 20 of those systems for a good radar cocoon around the car. And good radar cocoon means that you need to have a good 360-degree coverage, because otherwise you might overlook obstacles, and that of course must not happen as we had seen in the press some weeks ago. Yeah, and then of course a topic that is very close to my heart, and every time I had been here in Seoul in the last 3 years, I've talked about that topic already. And this is car-to-car communication, so automotive Wi-Fi. And again, so this is hard to see what's inside, but this is the form factor of these modules, of the car-to-car modules that we are using. And the great thing is, we have in the US quite a lot of business development. We had in Europe quite a lot of business development and wrestling. How good is that standard? How good will it be? We have tested in Ingolstadt with Audi on their racetrack over 2.3 kilometers of distance. We are talking to traffic lights in field trials. And then we are getting overtaken by Korea. Fortunately, really at a fast pace, and our business development teams here and the company iSys have done a fantastic thing here, because for the Winter Olympic Games 2018, there will be a 90-kilometer route equipped with 802.11p, where basically you have low latency car connectivity, and how that can benefit the user. I'm going to show you in a few videos going forward. The idea is, of course, to, on the one side, getting warned of obstacles much earlier, getting, on the other hand, informed how to drive. So if you're approaching a traffic light at full speed and the traffic light knows already I'm going to stay red for the next minute, then don't accelerate. Try to recuperate your energy, slow down, and then go to a certain average speed, 30 kilometers, to be exactly there when the traffic light switches to green and all that stuff. So smoothen the flow, and thereby avoiding traffic jams as well. So I personally, I'm very keen being one of the first persons to be on that road as soon as it's open, and I want to experience all the use cases. And what can these use cases be? Well, very simply, it's of course do not pass warnings for motorcycles. Yeah, that's important for me, but even more important for the guy on the motorcycle. If I'm behind the truck and I want to pull out and just overtake, and I'm getting the warning behind the truck already, Lars, don't do stupid things, there is a fast motorcycle approaching you. Okay, then I stay, of course. So this is communication outside of my line of sight. No human being, no radar sensor, no camera can do that, because it's outside of the line of sight. The other thing is, of course, I can see through obstacles. So I can see 3 or 4 cars ahead. There is a road construction unit, I get the warning there as well. Seeing around corners, I can see what's coming here. If there is a fast ambulance shooting into the crossroads here, or a crazy driver, then I get warned, and my car can calculate the point of no return for the crash, so it can brake earlier. And what is coolest, and we're going to show you a few videos on that towards the end of the presentation, is truck platooning. And JS, maybe you can directly press on that one. Then I show the first video. Truck platooning means these trucks are following each other. Only the first truck has a driver, and all the others are basically hands-off driven, like on a virtual tow bar, following via car-to-car communication. When the first brakes, the next one also brakes. The first truck can negotiate with a traffic light. Hey, I'm a road train, 5 trucks. Don't slow me down, keep me on green, because otherwise we are creating a traffic jam. So now he negotiates, go back to green, and the whole road train is rolling, Less noise, less pollution in the cities, and overall a smoother traffic flow for the city. So this is what we have tried to bring into real life, and that was in the Netherlands. DAF is a Dutch truck company, but we have also the Volkswagen companies like Scania, MAN, and 6 other truck companies in there. They were using our radar chips, and they are using our car-to-car V2X modules. And what they achieved to do, so these figures even have improved over time. The trucks can follow each other at 80 kilometers an hour, 11 meters distance. And when the first truck does an emergency braking, all the others are within 0.3, so not 0.5 seconds anymore, but below half a second, active with their brakes. Just imagine that with human drivers. So what that means is we have 5 milliseconds of time to send the message from the first truck to all the other trucks. I'm doing an emergency brake now. 5 milliseconds. And what that means is this truck sends the message, emergency brake, and then also digitally signs this and says, I'm truck number 1. So in other words, it shows his passport and says, this is a legal message of truck number 1. Because otherwise, if you would not have these authorized, authenticated messages, of course, I could always fake that I'm an ambulance and talk to every traffic light and say, hey, switch for me to green and I'm faster. That is, of course, not how that system could ever work. So that whole communication is, I'm sending a message, I'm digitally signing that, this is truck number 1, and then it goes everywhere, and the other trucks are receiving that message, are decoding that message, are verifying that message, and all of that 3 to 5 milliseconds. And then the message has to be sent to the braking system, brake, and the brakes are moving and are at the wheels. And all of that 0.3 seconds. Normally we are calculating for a human driver, you see the brake lights coming up of your car in front of you. It takes you 1 second to realize, oh, brake lights. Put your foot on the brake and react. So this is at least 1.5 seconds, up to having that same reaction achieved. So now you can assume, just calculate, over 5 trucks that delay chain, or you have between truck 1 and truck 5, 0.3 seconds, because this is of course not adding up between the trucks anymore, because each truck after 5 milliseconds has that message. So it is much more being prepared and avoiding accidents by being better prepared. Yeah? And this is of course especially for dense traffic, for truck platoons, quite an interesting thing. And maybe JS, we are going here to that other video for a second, so that you can see how that looks in real life. So that was basically the video that we did with the DAF trucks. Here you see the trucks following each other.
For us to demonstrate this new technology, I would even say that it has exceeded our initial expectations. What we can demonstrate matches or probably.
So you see how closely they are following each other. And this is our sensor systems in there. Hands off. And you see that? What happened there was the first truck is really doing emergency braking, and the other at the same point in time. They can react with their sensor systems and can negotiate if other non-car-to-car communication cars are in there. But in principle, of course, they are following each other on a very close distance. Unfortunately, I've never been in one of those trucks, so that's still one of my goals for this year, because some of my friends, they reported to me that it feels pretty strange. Normally in traffic, we as human drivers, we are used to, the first truck is braking, and I see the brake lights, and then my car, of course, comes closer to that car. Here in these trucks, it is, you see the brake lights, you're feeling the restraint system coming up, so holding you back, but basically the distance stays, because it's always these 11 meters. The first one is completely on the brakes, the second one, the third one, the fourth one. So they are all moving in, we call it as virtual tow bars. So they have between the trucks like truck and trailer, a tow bar, and this is of course a virtual one. Yeah. So that is the stuff that I find extremely attractive at the moment. And so the good news for us was, out of these 6 truck companies that had participated in these trials in Germany and the Netherlands, 4 used our 802.11p systems, and basically the same electronics that is installed here on the Korean highway as well. So what does that mean? We have globally a lot of activities running, and this is over the various countries. As said, I got completely surprised by how smooth and fast Korea was moving here with the innovations. We had since 2005 field trials in Japan. We are discussing in Singapore for succession of the ERP system. Yeah? China made some field trials. Europe was typical European thing, of course. Europe was debating for quite a while how to do it with all the various member states, but there is cooperative test beds running, there is cooperative topics like the truck platooning. And then at CES in Las Vegas this year, we had a booth. We have the big pitch there, and one of our lobbyists, US lobbyists, came and said, Lars, can you talk to 2 guys out of Washington? I said, yeah, okay. Another lobbyist from Washington. I gave that pitch to those guys. And then in the evening, I received an email, can you please close down your booth tomorrow lunchtime for an hour? And we said, of course we cannot. All the big shots from HKMC and from LG are planned for tomorrow lunchtime. So we have executive meetings. Why? Yeah, well, because Mr. Anthony Fox, the US Minister of Transport, and his whole staff would like to visit you. And what I did not know is that 2 guys had not been lobbyists, that had been employees of the US Minister of Transport. They saw our stuff and they looked at that and they liked it. This is the US Minister of Transport, Mr. Anthony Fox. This is Rick Klemmer, my boss, and this is Kurt Sievers, my boss. So he's the head of our automotive business, and Rick is heading the company. And this was the NXP truck in Las Vegas. So literally that whole team of the US Department of Transport came in. They talked to us and they said, you know what, NXP has great technology. Literally, I'm citing, NXP has great technology, but no one knows you probably we're going to help you here with a few field trials. And I said, okay, have you understood it correctly that the US Minister of Transport is doing business development for us? Was of course a fun joke there. No, it was not a joke, because Anthony Fox was at that moment setting up a competition between smart cities. So who is the smartest city in the US? And there were cities who could apply for that, and they would have gotten a grant of $50 million for putting infrastructure into their city to make the city even smarter. And they were handing in concepts. We partnered with him. So these two gentlemen had been on stage in Austin some 4 months ago and announced this publicly, that NXP and the US Ministry of Transport are joining forces for this smart city contest. Columbus was the city that was awarded 3 weeks ago. And now, of course, we are heavily also working on getting these car-to-car innovations, but also other things like long-range RFIDs, intelligent license plates in. So I'll probably give you a bit more insights towards the end when we have that time. But all in all, a very good thing. How did that whole car-to-car business come to existence? Well, what we have on there is one of the early systems of software-defined radio that we had. So that Mercury chip that you had just seen me passing around is one offspring towards the software-defined radio, AM, FM digital radio section. And what we had here is we have used the same technology for software-defined car-to-car communication. The good news is we have one silicon then, and we can exchange the firmware. So if you need a Japanese standard, if you would need Korean flavors, German flavors, US flavors, who cares? Change the firmware. But you do not have to requalify and then change the chip, which is good because these chips are not easy to make. They are $10 million R&D investments. And why? Well, because they have to survive in a shark fin antenna on the roof. They have to be not only robust in terms of cross-radiation and disturbance, but also temperature-wise. They need to be pretty robust. Otherwise, we have to do a lot to encapsulate the chips properly. So that whole thing is in place. And of course, we are dreaming at the moment with that software-defined radios, software-defined car-to-car communication, to come to the software-defined radar. And this is what I had shown you prior. These one chips, freely programmable. And NXP is a bit running on that. How much can we do software-defined and how can we master bringing the front ends, so the transmitters and the basebands together into one chip solutions. So much on the sensor side, yeah. But what do you do with all that sensor information if you don't have a brain, yeah? You have eyes, you have ears, you have a nose, and cannot calculate a advice for the robot out of that. That does not work, yeah? So in other words, the car needs a brain. And what we have there, you have seen it here, is called sensor fusion, and here is the word blue box. What we have done in automotive is we have looked in the company and have taken the various silicon that we had. We in automotive had automotive micro controllers, very heavy duty microcontrollers for functional safety, very robust operation. And then we have a sister division which is called digital networks. And digital networks deals with huge cloud computing, server farm microprocessors. So 80,000 DMIPS devices, so really dry stone MIPS, heavy duty computation devices. And these two chips together, if you take them, so a safety relevant microcontroller with all the car connectivity and the calculation monster, so an 8-core ARM machine, together, they are of course a perfect combination for a brain of a car. So you have supercomputing and safe computing to make sure that even if something goes wrong here, the thing does not drive off the road. You have the octa-core, 70 to 80,000, depending on which version you are using, DMIPS system, and the 10,000 DMIPS system as the second chip in there. And why is that thing called blue box? Well, because our developers were starting with a 19-inch blue development rack in their laboratories. We are having this at 4 of the 5 biggest car makers of the world. We are having this at the moment at a lot of tier ones, and what is even more important, at the software companies. Because what we need is, of course, we have an open Linux-based system at the moment, so universities can bring their recognition algorithms onto that system. It is made out of components that are already qualified, so it is shipping, it is usable in the automotive industry. The good news is, of course, what you are having on your, on your development desk next to your laptop as a development system is using the same silicon as the in-car systems then. It has only 40 watts of power consumption at these 90,000 BMIPs. And that's the important thing. There had been a lot of other companies out, and they easily come with systems of 250 to 300 watts water-cooled, which is pretty nasty for an in-car operation. Point one, it is very expensive having these water cooling systems. Point two, you might want to have even two of those systems for redundancy in the car. Yeah, then you're having 600 watts of power consumption on average in the car. This is not exactly a green driving, eco driving. And for a lot of normal ADAS functions on that 4 steps, so level 2 or 3, you don't need the full-blown system, but you need a smaller system. So with a system of 40 watts power consumption, we are very, very attractive with these type of partitionings. And we have, of course, as these chips are used for cloud computing, for big network routers, and in the car functional safety area, we have secure elements and security architecture already on all of these chips, so that also hacking security, this functional security, is immediately inbuilt there. And at the moment we are shipping these devices, and a lot of players are putting their development code on. This is of course not how it will end up in a car. Consider it just as a development platform at the moment, but I think that's exactly spot on in the industry what is needed. And well, you see it also, there was around the FTF event in Austin, when was it, 4 or 5 weeks ago, mid of May, was a lot of press coverage on that. For all of that, what you need is, of course, strong data connections. Well, and I've introduced this a few times here already. NXP is market leader for CAN, LIN, and FlexRay. So basically in these in-vehicle networks around the wiring harness, we have, of course, a lot of volume. And the next thing is 100 megabit Ethernet and even higher data rates. So basically what we have released beginning of this year is Ethernet physical layers and Ethernet switches, so that you can build complexer network architectures. And of course the key topic is these wiring harnesses are getting more and more heavy, more and more complex. So this is of a low-end car, a 30-kilo wiring harness. A Mercedes S-Class has a wiring harness that is more heavy than I am. Yeah, and of course what have we done is we have taken the normal Ethernet, but normal Ethernet doesn't do the job because you have a 4-wire system. We wanted to have a lightweight 2-wire system. We have licensed this standard from Broadcom, so a 2-wire 400 megabit standard, and have developed our own automotive grade chips out of that. Minus 40 to 125 degrees robust with a lot of diagnostics functions, and that is gonna making it into the car. And basically what that means is you are seeing at the moment that a normal car 10 years ago had one CAN bus and a few control units hooked up to that CAN bus. That was the network of the car. In the meantime, the cars have 200 or 250 control units, so the big ones, of course, the ultra high-end cars, BMW 7 Series, Mercedes S-Class, and the like. So a normal car today looks like a complete office building 10 years ago. You have 200 rooms, all need to get connected somehow because all of these rooms, control units, have a certain compute power internally, so they are computer systems. And suddenly, a car network looks a bit like an IT floor plan of an office building 10 years ago. You're having one main router or a central gateway. You're having different branches of your building. Yeah, so the engine compartment, the infotainment branch, your advanced driver assistant functionality, car access, and so on. And then you have sub-branches in there again. So basically what you have then is from these body domains you have, of course, access to certain actuators. But what you have is you compartmentalize your areas, just sketched here. And each of those areas is then a normal Ethernet network again. And some of the sub-branches, for example, here you see it, some of the sub-branches can then be CAN, LIN, and FlexRay again, yeah? But very, very complex. The good thing is each of those ECUs needs at least one, if not more, of the physical layers and of the switches. And that's leading to the last important part is this functional security. The whole robot that I have explained now to you needs to be secure. And I said already for the car-to-car communication, you need to have that security to making sure that my car cannot cheat in the system. But also for telematic systems, you have for sure read in the press last year the famous Jeep hack, where hackers from NSA could hack into a telematics unit and then could move into the entire car. So that was basically such a car network. You could hack into the telematics system, and then via the CAN bus, you could move everywhere in your building, to stay with that building example. Here, of course, you need to have security. So you need to have heavy-duty, to stay with that house example, heavy-duty protection at your entrances of your house. In the entrance hall of your house, in your gateway, so assuming you have a very complex house with 200 rooms now again, so you have a castle. In the entrance hall of your castle, you have these gateways. NXP is market leader for these gateway chips, and we are adding there a lot of crypto security directly into these gateways to make sure that if someone is entering here, he cannot easily via that gateway go into a different branch of that network. So you can, in other words, if you enter the infotainment wing of your castle, not get into the engine management wing of your castle anymore. So the Jeep hack of last year, where you could go from the telematics system to the engine department and to the infotainment system, that would not work in that construction down there. And of course, what we're doing, each of those nodes, each microcontroller here, gets additional security. So basically what you have is, if you could come in here, you cannot move to the next neighbor, but for sure you cannot move to a room in a different wing. And this is at the moment what we are doing, and plus on top of that we are basically securing, of course, we are checking the traffic on the networks here. Because if, for example, a trailer hook control unit shouts over this bus, hey, everyone please lower the windows and open the doors, then we filter that out and we are checking and say, hey, trailer hook, how comes that you are sending that message? You are not entitled to send that message. And all that electronics we have out there. So what you see is there is not one size fits all security. Security is basically a function of all these components that we are discussing at the moment. And well, basically, of course, we are heavily leveraging what we have in the car access domain, where we are market leader for all these car key solutions. And we are even exporting that to the IoT domain, so to smart meters, little crypto chips there. And of course, we are trying to integrate this into all use cases. And this is my famous slide of what we are normally doing, just to also showcase what is happening in the connected car domain. But connected cars are just very, very expensive things in the Internet of Things. Yeah. So this is, trucks are negotiating with the traffic light and are basically switching on the traffic lights. Then we have these little stickers here, RFIDs, that are readable over 20 meters. My daughter in Hamburg has one of those things in her school bag, so she's 11 years old. And when she approaches this traffic light here, the traffic light sees there is a school kid coming. And via this car-to-car communication that we are installing here now as well, the traffic lights can communicate back to the cars and say, hey, slow down, there is a kid at the traffic light. We had the same here in these bags of the people. This was a completely autonomous driving car on a German racetrack. And we had here a walkway installed on that racetrack. So this car was racing laps on the racetrack. No one in the car, so just the car was busy with itself. And then the ladies here were carrying the bag. So the traffic light here could see the bag is coming, could send via V2X, car-to-car communication, the message to that car and said, pedestrians, 200 meters ahead, you stop at the traffic light. And way before the radar sensors or the cameras of this car would have seen the pedestrians, the car was already slowing down and stopping. We had our discussions. This is Andy Greenberg. This is the guy who hacked the Jeep. And we had our discussions with him at the Frankfurt Motor Show last year on talking about our security architectures. Forget about cars. We're talking about transportation. We can, of course, use the same car-to-car communication electronics again for doing anti-collision transponders for drones. Because you're flying your drone out of the line of sight. By aviation laws, you have to have an anti-collision transponder in your drone. The only nasty thing is such a normal anti-collision transponder has a weight of 10 kilos. So if you want to deliver a 3 kilo Amazon parcel, the drone never gets a lift off because the battery is empty before you can move your anti-collision transponder. So this tiny little module, the car-to-car module here can do that job pretty easily. That one you have seen, the trucks you have seen. We are building at the moment with local motors a self-driving bus to just put all our electronics in, and even a 3D printed car we have. So a polymer car that is just printed in 2 days. The car is printed. We put the wheels on, we put an engine in, and we put all our electronics in. So I think the next year you can see that on movies driving. And the last thing here is we are playing with students. So some of our students are building motorcycles, electric motorcycles. And the Dutch motorcycle group here wants to, so students, they want to, with that bike here, want to drive around the globe in 80 days. So electric cycle, super heavy, 450 kilos, I think, so really a monster, but electric driven. And why do I have this on the page here? Very simple. Because I have a ring here at my hand, and that ring was not a gift of my wife, but I got this from my boss, so sounds a bit strange. But that ring, and you can have a look at it, that ring is containing NFC and security, secure element, like in a banking card. And what we're doing with that is, of course, if you have this at your finger and you're touching the bike handle, it is working like an immobilizer. Only then you can drive. So the funny use case, yeah, like John Wayne comes out of the saloon, jumps on his horse and starts riding, is of course always very cool, and every motorbiker wants to have that as well. It is very easy realizable if you have your ring at your finger. No one realizes where your key is. And of course we are putting that at the moment onto the market in countries like India as well, where you have a lot of two-wheelers, but where the cost sensitivity is very high. So these passive keyless entry systems, for example, would be too expensive for cheap two-wheelers. And you just have this here. So we are using this also for, that's my favorite example, for jet skis in the water. The thing is waterproof, completely robust, and if I'm falling off the jet ski, of course the engine can switch off. So very, very easy to handle. But what you see with that is we are going with this connectivity electronics far beyond the normal use cases. And the last thing is what my daughter has in the backpack. Of course, we can integrate also into license plates, and then the license plate can act as a contactless badge. Like this one here. Here I'm going to the office here, hold it against the card reader and open the office. My car is doing that in Hamburg. So driving to the gate and say, hey, gate up, and I do not need the security guys anymore to look at my face and to believe me that I'm Lars. So in a nutshell, what we have is we have all ingredients from A to C. NXP is spending significant effort, and you hear this in my storytelling, for going into system solutions and for inviting other people to play with our chips, with our Lego blocks, with our reference designs. And the great thing is that the car makers at the moment are approaching us and saying, you bring all your reference designs, we car makers play with that, and then we go back to the tier ones. So it is very often not anymore the case that we go to the tier ones and the tier ones go to the car makers. No, the car makers go back to us, so up upstream the value chain and say, what do you have in terms of innovation in your research labs, so that we can play with that and we can faster industrialize and can differentiate against others. Yeah? So that is basically the updates, of course, main updates on the V2X side, main updates on the blue box fusion side, and on the radar side. So what I guess is, next time I'm here, there will be significant updates in this ADAS domain for the self-driving robots. And I hope that I can show you then at least movies of a self-parking NXP car that is basically hovering around and finding its parking spot for itself. Because that is my next dream, so that I can jump out directly at the restaurant and the car is washing, fueling, and parking itself. Thank you.